multi-volume monographs on law, Islamic thought in Sudan. So I'm going to hand over the session to Professor Makki to discuss about the role of Sudan.
السلام عليكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم. اليوم the 4th of Rajab. One 447, and of course you know the other date. To know something about that, I want to make a comparison between Sudan and Egypt. Egypt is a centralized country, 1,600 kilometers in Egypt. But the Nile flows 6,000 kilometers in Sudan. And Egypt, if Egypt is a gift of the Nile is originated in Sudan. And if you talk about the Egyptian population, maybe more than 90% of the Egyptian lived near the Nile, while in Sudan, less than 40% of the population lived near the line and the Nile, because Sudanese also depend on the rain. And for this, if you want to talk about Egypt, you have to talk about centralization from the pharaoh to these days. If you want to talk about Sudan, talk about decentralization, because there is different states, different population, tribes, and languages. In Egypt, it's only Arabic and foreign language. But in Sudan, more than 89 local languages. So if we want to talk about Sudan from a regional point of view, I will talk about some from 5 aspects. The first aspect, Sudan in the Nile is different, Nile Basin and Nile Valley. When you talk about Nile Valley, you talk about Egypt, Sudan. But when you talk about Nile Basin, you talk about 11 countries. Here, these countries are Egypt, Southern Sudan, Congo, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and very important, because now people talk the water more than 600 million. That will have all the is coming from the to feed our people, and because we want the water itself to be a commodity. And if you use water as commodity, you have to pay for it to the commodity. And the United Nations actually accepted this here. They started and began what we call the Antibi group. Antibi is capital Kampala, and Antibi is just like Algeria and Cairo. Antibi group is the capital of Uganda, Antibi. And it's 5 countries meet there and sign the Antibi agreement. But you know, the Nile Basin are 11 countries. What is new? The previous year, Southern Sudan signed the Antibi agreement and they became 6. And now they handed the agreement to the United Nations and it was registered there and became JUZUM undocumented there. So what will happen? Actually, I have written an article in an Egyptian magazine called Wujhat Nazar. I don't know what is it still going or not. And in it, I reviewed some of the Israeli literature about the Nile water. And they encourage this Nile basin water to take their share from the water, and they encourage the idea of the commodity of the water. And now the Israeli are just hitting the drums about the water war. Here, the Sudan is in dilemma. Sudan is in dilemma. And because Sudan is a country of a double marginality. It is not completely an Arab, not completely an African, both African and Arab. So the Africans are saying, oh, you're just You are not looking to your responsibility and brotherhood with the African. Just follow the Egyptian. And you know, if you revise the Nile Agreement, this is for the benefit of the Sudanese, because Sudan is one of the largest countries in Africa. Let me give you an idea about the Nile, from where it flows. The Nile flows actually from Tana Lake, and Tana Lake in Ethiopia provides the Nile with about 10%. And the Tana Lake is about 3,000 kilometers in space, just half Istanbul. And the other source is Victoria Lake. Victoria Lake is about 67 kilometers in space. That is maybe 10 times equal to Istanbul. I just want to. And Victoria Lake is shared by 3 countries. Tanzania, which have about 6% of the border of this lake, and Uganda, about 15%, and Kenya, the others. But most of the other water of the Nile, this provides the Nile with about 7%. Most other source of the Nile is from the raining from the high mountains of Ethiopia and tributaries which are coming for Ethiopia. And for the students, so as to know, there is about 5 small rivers, Sobat, Ad-Dindir, Ar-Rahad, etc., and thousands of Kiram, which provides the Nile to the basin. Now, what is the strategy of Ethiopia? The strategy of Ethiopia is not only building this high dam, which they call the Renaissance Dam, because the Renaissance Dam provides electricity. But they are going to build small dams under these small rivers for irrigation. And this is, of course, will affect the Nile water. And for this, the Egyptian, for them, this is a nightmare if this country started, because now Egypt is in a state of hunger, water hunger. And if this 10 countries started to use their share, what will happen? So this is one of the most important issues which is facing Sudan. What shall we do as Sudanese? Should we, because the Egyptian, they don't want to negotiate. Sudanese want to negotiate. Because if where is the war will occur? It will occur in Sudan. Because 6,000 kilometers of the Nile originated in Sudan. Only 1,500 kilometers originated in Egypt. So if you want to control Sudan, you have to control Sudan. And this is, okay, I will stop here and take another aspect. The other aspect is Sudan as part of Red Sea system. The Red Sea system is shared by also 7 countries: Yemen, Eritrea, Djibouti, Sudan, Saudi Arabia. This is the main. And no, Somalia is the ocean. And Israel and Jordan. Jordan less than 20 kilometers. And Sudan 600 kilometers. Israel about 1 mile in Eilat. But the most important power in the Red Sea is Israel and America. And every trial to make an organization for the Red Sea countries failed because there are 3 countries that look against any system here because they don't recognize Israel. And if you want to make an organization, you have to admit Israel in this organization. Saudi Arabia, half, but Sudan and Yemen is against that. And you know, in 1967, the war started when Jamal Abdel Nasser closed the Strait of Tehran. And if you want any common policy about the Red Sea, you have to negotiate with Israel because Israel is the master of the Red Sea. And Israel is saying that Sudan is terrorizing the Red Sea by providing secretly arms for Hamas and Al-Jihad and other movement. And actually, it have destroyed many establishments in Sudan because of that. Airplanes. So what is the future of the Red Sea system? I will let you talk about it and discuss it. The third system for Sudan is Sahara and Sahel system. Sahara and Sahel system actually as an organization, it was signed by 6 countries, which are Libya, Sudan, Niger, and Mali, and Chad. But I'm not going to, but after that it was signed by 25 countries. But I'm not going to talk about the agreement itself. I'm going to talk about the community. The drought hit the Sahel and Sahara countries. And there is 2 factors. There is the Arab of the diaspora here, who are mainly herders, and the French, the Francophone countries, which are Niger, Mali, Chad. Most of the Sahel countries, except of Nigeria, are in the Francophone. France wanted to expel the Arab from this area because he's afraid of the Arabization of this area. And the Arab, because of the natural disaster of the drought and famine, they started to look to Sudan as land of immigration. And they are fighters. And Gaddafi started to give them arms. And I have attended one of these conferences in Timbuktu. I was invited there. And Gaddafi himself came. And all these groups were there. And actually they asked me to, because they are not interested, to let the platform for Sadiq al-Mahdi to talk in the name. I said, I am not an Arab, I am a Nubian, because I don't want to
enter in this dilemma. But after that, about 1 million of this Arab diaspora, this Arab migrants came to Sudan seeking grazing and seeking water. And they are under arms. And they began to expel the native of the African natives in Darfur. In Darfur, there is 26 tribes shared neighborhood with these tribes. Yani you will find Zagawa in Darfur, a Zagawa in Chad. If a Zagawa from the Chad entered Darfur, he is automatically a Sudanese. If a Zagawa Sudanese entered Chad, he is automatically Chadian. 2/3 of the Zagawa are in Darfur. 1/3 of the Zagawa are in Chad. But now, Chad is a Zagawa kingdom. And they started invading Chad from Darfur. Yani, Idris Deby recruited his army from الطينة السودانية to الطينة التشادية to Fort Lamy, or now Fort Lamy, the ex name, now it is Jamena. And I will just tell a little story about the history of Jamena, because these are communities, they are not states. In 1974, Zubair Basha, Sudanese army leader, at that time Sudan was under the Egyptian authority. He united Darfur to Sudan, but he was asked to come to Egypt. When he went to Egypt, Al-Khadawi Tawfiq told him, "Oh, Zubair Basha, we will not allow you to go back to Sudan, because Egypt will not tolerate to have a strong man in Sudan." And they expelled him, and he fight with the Ottoman Empire in Ukraine today in the War of Gilm. And after that was expelled to Jabal Tariq. So he left his son under guiding his army. But Jex Pasha, one of the Europeans there, killed his son. And here, one of the troop leaders of Zubair Pasha, he said, "I will not submit to the British and the Egyptian." And he conquered all West Africa and made the empire of Rabih Fadlallah. And the empire of Rabih Fadlallah include now Chad, Borno in Nigeria, Cameroon. The French tried to attack him, and the war started in Rabih Fadlallah and the French in 1901. Actually, he was killed. But when he was killed, to see, he took his revolver and killed the French Lamy. For this, they called Jamena Fort Lamy from that. When the in the independent, they realized that old name. So the idea is this is there's a vacuum here. And this vacuum can be felt with any authority. And now it's felt, of course, with the French and the Israelis and. So as I said, about 1 million of this, and now they expelled the native from here to Chad. About 1,500,000 were expelled, and now they took refuge in Chad. And they began this war of Sudan. Actually, one of the mistakes of the Sudanese government, and because John Garang, as that what, who is the leader of Sudanese revolution against so zone after zone. Zone 1 will be Salazar. And actually, I have stayed in prison during the time of Yahya for 3 years. And my roast meets with Rolf Steiner. Also was in prison there. He was a mercenary. And he has a famous book. He called it The Last Sultan Sudan, and how he helped to organize the rebels and to make military bases. And he's a German, actually. So what I am saying that Israel is interested now in the Sahel and Sahara war, because they think that they also this will cause trouble to Sudanese, and the world will stand against Sudan to these private forces. But the European Union succeeded in changing the strategy of the private forces, saying that, okay, we will agree with you. We will have the African borders against the immigration to when with a very New York. Budget 50 millions, 50 million around. And there's a very documented book. You can the father of Zahran Mahmoud Mahmadani in Darfur. And he came to me in my office and to many Sudanese, and he documented how the Zionist and the American used the idea of save Darfur, from saving Darfur to a tool to destroy Sudan and use it against what they call their war terrorism or guerrillas terrorism. So this is the idea of Sahel al-Sahara system. And now I will go to the 4 aspects of the new system. It is called the 3-area system. The 3-area system. The 3-area system actually is one of the poisoned system in Sudan, because it is after the separation of South Sudan, the American and those who sponsored the agreement say that there are 3 areas in Sudan, they're unresolved, and we have to raise them to be resolved in future, because the America itself is interested in them because there is oil there. They called in APA, which there's a lot of oil here in APA. All actually, most of Sudanese oil is coming through APA. And APA, there is different tribes, southern tribes and northern tribes is one area. The other area is southern Kordofan area, is Jibal al-Nuba called. And they are saying that because Sudanese and Janjaweed is trying to dominate this area. And the third area is the Blue Nile area. The Blue Nile area is the Blue Nile important to me. The White Nile is originated there. So you remember when Al-Baba Francis, you know Papa Francis? Just is here. He invited the governor of South Sudan, Salva Kiir, and his deputy, like Mashar, and their wife too. They just spoke and kissed their shoes. This has never happened in history. He kissed the shoes of the two. And after that, before maybe he died, on his chair, pushed by his chair, he went and the president of Canterbury Anglican Church and the Independent Church of Scotland in a mission to Sudan, also in history, the 3 of them, because they are against Anglican and the Catholic and independent church of why? Because the sanity is challenged here. If Christianity promoted here, '62, the Vatican book of Sudan. Never the Vatican will attack a state like that. The Black Book of Sudan. I hope you can have. There's a genocide in Sudan. Sudanese are eliminating Christianity, and for these 3 areas is very the oil companies, and actually the oil companies, the oil in Sudan although was discovered by the American, by Chevron, but it was produced traded on by the Chinese. And the American wanted to expel the Chinese from Sudanese oil. And so this is the core aspect of Sudanese in the region. How can it control oil? How can it control these areas? Now, actually, مثلا, for example, southern Kordofan is dominated by the rebel movement and have its own capital called Kauda, and have its own airstrip. And actually, David Beasley, the director of the food program, visited it, and with the ex-Prime Minister of Sudan, Abdullah Hamdok. So these three areas is actually is a corridor for interference and for igniting still the war in Sudan. The 5 aspects of Sudan in the region is how Sudan can control its borders. You know, Sudan have borders with Egypt. We have a problem with Egypt, but I don't think it's that serious because the Egyptian took Halab, and Halab is the old port of the old Sudan. And when Richard al-Assad wanted to fight Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, the first thing he did in 1989, he destroyed the port of Rizab of Halab so as to cut Salah ad-Din from any imdad from Sudan. The second problem is with Ethiopia. Ethiopia does not want to make the limitation for Sudanese borders. Just why? Because it also seeking acquired rights, because many Ethiopians became farmers in Sudanese land, and saying that they wanted acquired rights here, and they don't want to see the borders with Sudan. And the third problem is with Chad, of course, and Libya, and this open borders making heading for some, because you cannot control the smuggling and there. Smuggling of people, smuggling of gold, smuggling of whatever. Sudan have protection. Now, as I said, the Africans, in Sudan, they think that Sudan is a land of double marginality. While we are saying that Sudan is corridor of Africa. But why Israelis are so interested in Sudan? Why Israel? For all these reasons, but I will, yesterday, I met a Palestinian, here. And he introduced himself and said, from where you are? قال from Gaza, from Fada, Fallujah. And قال my father told me that there were Sudanese frontier here in Fallujah, and there is one Sudanese one of these Sudanese Fidayin, well known here in the area. I said, oh, I know him. It's Taha Sayyid. He was called by the Jews الضبع الأسود, the black tiger. Actually, 1948, when Imam al-Banna asked for Fidayin to come, 1,200 Sudanese went as Fidayin to fight in Palestine. And they have done a lot of fighting there. And at that time, they should fight in Sudan because that was colonized. But they give the priority to go and help the Palestinians. And the Jews in their, if you read Ben Gurion and others, they think that this is very dangerous because Sudanese have the will to fight. And Malik Farouk give them medals and visit them. And actually, after that, started this hostility between Sudan and Israel. In 1967, when the Egyptian and the Jordanian and the Syrian were defeated, and Sinai were taken, and the Golan and the West land, there was a very great joy in Israel. But this great joy was spoiled by Sudan for the Israelis, because Sudan invited the Arab countries, pan-Arab, to meet in Khartoum. And they have the meeting in Khartoum in September 1967. And in 1977, the three no's of Khartoum: no negotiation, no recognition, and no reconciliation with Israel. So this is spoiled the great joy of the Israelis, because at that time they think that Abdel Nasser will surrender, and the Egyptian, the world magazine started to talk about Khartoum to receive the defeated Nasser. And in Khartoum also, in Khartoum conference, the reconciliation between King Faisal and Abdel Nasser, and the withdrawal of the Egyptian troops from Yemen, about 70,000 soldiers. And this became the backbone of the Egyptian army to face Israel in the Istinzaf war. The third aspect is the sorting of the Yemen agreement, that King Faisal should not help the Badr group. The Badr is Al-Imamiyya, and Abdel Nasser should not help the Republican, this the follower of Abdullah Salal. And after that, actually, the Egyptian all the airlines of Egypt, war airlines, came to Khartoum, and the war college was transferred to Khartoum, and Khartoum became the base. And actually, at that time, Mao Zedong asked the Egyptian, said to the Egyptian, of course, they didn't make your capital Khartoum, not Egypt, so as to have adepts. So the Israel from that time saying that Khartoum should be destroyed. And this war now, what happened now, I think what happened in Khartoum and the destruction in Khartoum, it is not only this civil war or this, but something guided by intelligence, guided by informants. And I will stop here and thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Maki. I mean, that was a tour de force on the geopolitics of Sudan, and it was grounded in a lot of information that I learned, and I'm so honored for your participation here. Let me open the session up with any questions that you may have for the professor. We have about 30 minutes. Questions and answers. Oh yeah, sure.
Thank you so much again for this presentation. As always said, it was really grounded in the understanding of the different factors for the geopolitical nature and importance of Sudan. I do have many questions regarding that. And I'm going to start with the Zionist threat towards Sudan. Certainly, the study that was issued back in February 1982, which anybody can Google on the internet under the phrase the Ordered Demand Plan, ODEDYIMA. It came right before the withdrawal from the Sinai, and it was grounded on the thought that the only way Israel could survive being in the Middle East is to break up the Middle East. And the whole document you can read, it's about 20 plus pages, was translated into English by Israel Shah, which talks about how we're going to break up this, and particularly different regions. But Sudan was prominently there, and I believe there are other sources that talk about how there was a special group. Sudan got its independence on January 1st, 1956.
Yeah.
Within 1 year, there was a group within the Mossad and a group in the foreign ministry to see how they can break up Sudan into north and south. And when Salva Kiir, the current president of South Sudan, when he did his first foreign trip after independence in 2010, he visited Tel Aviv, and on the tarmac, this is something I witnessed myself. He said that if there was a person that should get a credit for establishing or the independence, we call it independence of South Sudan, it should be this person. And he put his arm around him, and he was the chief of the Mossad station in Juba. In other words, Israel for over 50 years was working very, very aggressively in trying to break up Sudan. And I believe now what is happening with Darfur is another attempt to break up even further Sudan. And in this case, we also have Arab participants, not just the Zionist factor with Israel. We have Emiratis and this and that. So I want to know a little bit more about, I know that you talked about that Sudan is the strategic depth of Egypt, and Egypt has always in the Zionist mind represented the traditional or the classical threat in terms of conventional warfare. Other than nuclear, Egypt was always central into being existential threat if there is a classical warfare, conventional warfare. And certainly Sudan would have been the strategic depth of Egypt. So breaking up Sudan also weakens Egypt, which is the principal threat. So if you can elaborate a little bit about that as well. Now, you talked about destroying Khartoum. If Khartoum is the central government where Sudan is, destroying Khartoum certainly may break up even Sudan further. And what would be the role of foreign influences? I would like you to shed light on US, if there is a role, Ethiopia, if there is a role, Eritrea, if there is a role, certainly the Emiratis. Now the Sudanese government is accusing the Emiratis of playing a central role here, as well as Israel. All these together, if you can elaborate a little bit about the foreign factor into this. And then the second part of this question has to do with the internal cohesion. Why has the Islamic movement, which was at the cusp of establishing at least within the Sunni world, an example or a model when they started their ascendance in 1899, why did they crumble and how did that happen? What would be the main 2, 3, 4 points that we can learn from that experiment, and what is the situation now on the ground? Have they learned some lessons? Can they regroup? Or is this something that come and gone? So the role of the Islamic movement, particularly, my own experience is that the Sudanese Islamic movement was one of probably the most mature by the time they got to power. It's not like they were not novices when you compare to other groups, even within the Sunni world, I'm excluding obviously Iran for obvious reasons. And a lot of people had hopes here, but it crumbled so quickly after that, and then it totally was devastated, particularly after the breakup of Sudan. So if you can shed some lights about these two aspects, the internal aspects about the role of the Islamic movement, where things stand today, as well as the foreign influences in trying to break up Sudan further, and where does that stand today? Are they, which tie? And finally, this thing about the normalizations with Israel that the Burhan or others have been rumored to have been part of, that they have already signed on, but it hasn't been really disclosed publicly, even though we read a lot of reports from the US, from Israeli reports, that this is a done deal, it has been done and everything, even though it hasn't been disclosed publicly. So these are the 3 points I would like to elaborate on.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Let's answer the 4, and then we will continue. There's a lot there, so we'll.
Well, of course, I agree with you that the Israeli have an strategy towards Sudan, and they're calling it tightening the limits by encouraging all those who are against the unity of Sudan, or all those who are against the Islamic movement. And of course, they can recruit because many tribes and there is a strike and buffer the areas, and Israeli actually succeeded, I think, in their tightening limbs of Sudan. And as you say, I have said that I have been in prison with Rolf Steiner, and he's the one who came to Sudan in 1660, maybe 67 or something like that, after this war. And actually, he started his work from Uganda. And at that time, Uganda was under Idi Amin. And Idi Amin was pro-Israeli at that time. But he changed after that, of course, because of Gaddafi and King Faisal, and this is a different story, and I won't go in it. But actually, at that time, they started building the Anania one. Anania, it means the poisonous scorpion. And Anania started its tour from the, and as I have read most of the Southern Sudan literature written by the elite of Southern Sudan. All of it is separatist in nature.
Is what?
Separatist in nature
Separatist.
and essential. And for this separation of South Sudan, I think is a logical conclusion of this historical process and post the investment of the church and the investment of the Israeli and the investment of the superpowers. And up to date, now the province of Sudan is a organized government and was part of the United Nations, part of Pan-Africa, part of Pan-Arab. But whenever there is a declaration from the Security Council or from America, they don't say that the war in Sudan is between the government Sudan and American group or mutiny group. They think there are two sides. And they equalizing the rebel and the government till tomorrow. Tomorrow, yesterday, the Security Council asked the Prime Minister of Sudan to deliver a talk. When he delivered his declaration, at the end, they say that they say that the two sides, and they know that the rebels are destroying, are killing, and they know that every area controlled by the army is secure, but they don't care because they think that, and in the Rubaiya, this four forces declaration, United States and Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Emirates. They are saying that the threat against Sudan is from the Islamic movement. And that Islamic movement should have no future in Sudan. And they know that if it was not the Islamic movement in Sudan, Sudanese army cannot stand against the Arab forces. Because as I told you, in Khartoum, when this war started, the Sudanese army consists of about 12,000 fighters, while the rebel movement about more than 100,000 fighters. But at the end, Islamists stand for it, and they liberate Khartoum and Northern Sudan. And now about Sudan is about 70% of Sudan under the control of the government because of the help of the same movement. It's only different from the other Islamic movement in the Arab world. And actually, if you ask me what will happen, these superpowers calling about two sides. And we know that it is not two sides, it is a unity against illegal and government. You have mentioned a very important aspect of this war, that what is about the Abraham Accord. Actually, the secret negotiation, they are saying to Sudanese, if you want peace, just you have to sign the Abraham Accord, and to expel all the Palestinians. And you know, there's no now Palestinians, and to cut your relations with this Palestinians movement. And to allow the international security to come and to see Sudan and to inspect. And they want the Islamists to be in prison, like happening in the other Arab countries. And this is a challenge, of course, to Sudan, or a corridor of war. If you want to be a corridor of peace, you have to, Israel will not tolerate. And for this, they are using an Emirat and others. And now, I think the war will not end now. It will take its time, 3-4 more years. And the legal government cannot center. And but I think the most important aspect will be what's the situation on the earth, on the land. I don't think from within, and I don't think what happened to other Islamic movement in other countries will happen in Sudan, because the Islamic movement in Sudan is deeply rooted. And now what happened actually in Sudan created a new mentality among Sudanese. And Sudanese now think that they knew the plan against their land, the plan against their country. And they know that there will be no future to Sudan if they accept the Abraham Accord, not because of recognizing Israel, but because the new governor of the Sudan will be against the Islam, will be against, and there will be tools to the Israelis, and Sudanese will not allow that. This is my reading to the situation.
Thank you. Yes.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. سمعكم عذرا، جزاك الله خيرا أخي حسن. من زمان ما سمعناك. وبروفيسور حسن مكي صديق قديم، وأعرفه ظاهرا وباطنا، وأعرف فكره وهدوءه، وأعرف، لكن لأول مرة الآن أعرف أنه رجل استراتيجي. كنت أحسبه مفكرا فقط، لكن هذه المحاضرة جعلت من البروفيسور حسن مكي استراتيجي،
لأنه تحدث لنا عن المشكلات الأساسية التي تواجه السودان، وكل ذلك ربطه بإسرائيل. ولماذا إسرائيل تحارب السودان؟ إضافة إلى ما ذكره الأخ حسن، فمن المعلوم أن الذين يعني يهزمون اليهود هم جند من السودان، ورد في الآية كما تعلم. فلذلك لا بد لنا من أن ننظر إلى هذه العلاقات الدولية. مصر والسودان وكل البلاد العربية بكل أسف هي تحت الهيمنة الإسرائيلية. أما نحن لا بد لنا أن ننظر إلى طريقة جديدة لمجابهة الأمر. لا أنا ولا دكتور العريان ولا حسن ولا ركن فريدة ولا خالد ولا كل الموجودين هنا يستطيعوا أن يفعلوا شيئا سوى أن نتكلم. هنالك حركات إسلامية نعرفها جميعا، حركة الإخوان المسلمين سيطرت على الوضع في مصر ولم تستطيع أن تستمر. الحركة الإسلامية السودانية سيطرت على الوضع في السودان 30 عاما ثم ذهبت. الآن لابد لنا أن نجلس نحن كمفكرين وكأفراد، وأنا أدعو أخونا الدكتور العريان لتبني فكرة لقاءات تجمع المفكرين بعيدا عن التأطير والحرب أو الانتماء لأي من الحركات. نحن يا أخوان نحتاج أن نفكر بحرية. الحركات تجعلنا لا نخرج من إطارها بموجب الالتزام الذي نلتزم به ونطيعه فيما أقرته الشيوخ. هذه الحركات التي في الكرامة وصلنا إلى باب السلام. الآن نحن نحتاج إلى حركة شعبية، لأنه لا نملك المال المناسب ولا نملك الأدوات المناسبة لنغير، ولن تغير هذه الحركات. أنا يعني بفضل الله سبحانه وتعالى جلست إلى 4 من مرشدي الإخوان المسلمين ابتداء من التلمسان، وجلست مع حسن الترابي وزاملته قرابة الحاج محمد عباس صاحب دار الأصالة للنشر رئيس اتحاد الناشئين السودانيين منذ 68. أرانا البيان. والله أنا يعني حزين جدا جدا، لأنه لا أملك شيئا. ننظر إلى الحاصل ولا نستطيع أن نغير. لابد يا إخوان نجلس جلسات مع بعض. لم تفعل الحركة الإسلامية السودانية الإخوان المسلمين في مصر قد يرونها لم يأتوا بجديد، لم يأتوا بجديد أبدا. دعونا نفكر، دعونا ننطلق، دعونا ننشر مثل هذه الكلمات التي ذكرها أخونا حسن. هذا التفكير الاستراتيجي بسيط. تحدث أخونا حسن حديث سهل ممتنع، لا أمامه ورقة ولا أمامه مرجع، ولكنها هي يعني دفقات المسلم، دفقات الإحساس بالحاصل. أنا والله ما أقدر أتكلم، لكن أدعوكم دكتور عريان، دكتور حسن، أرجو ويضيق في لغتنا. نحن محتاجين، نحن محتاجين. لعلك فهمتني. جزاكم الله.
خليني بس أترجم ترجمة السؤال.
السياسيين تعبونا يا أخي بالله.
I'll translate this just for those who are listening. The speaker is a publisher from Sudan. It's part of the Islamic movement. And he says that he did not know that Professor Hassan Makki, our speaker today, is not only an Islamic thinker, also a strategic thinker. And he was very appreciative of the presentation, which linked the situation in Sudan with the attempt by the Israeli regime to break up Sudan. And he says that we have to look at the current international situation, international relations in the region, Egypt, Sudan, the rest of the Arab countries, and how they have been now under Israeli hegemony. So that we need a new way of looking at the situation so that we can deal with it. We then talked about the Islamic movement, particularly the Islamic Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and the Islamic movement in Sudan, and that he's been observing them, and we have relations with the leaders in these movements. And he said that we really need to start thinking outside the framework of these movements, but these movements have limitations in how people think. And what we need is a popular movement that would look at the situation an attempt to strategically and thoughtfully think of the way out. And we had the thinkers such as Professor Hassan Makki, so that we can spread it throughout the Muslim world.
Thank you. I want to collect more questions and have time, so if you could be a little bit brief.
Statistics that you spelled out regarding the nature of Sudan, because language, Islam, and ethnic roots of Africa. This gives us the power which can control all these aspects and the power of Sudan for making new of culture should be removed. If we can remove this power from Sudan, Sudan can be controlled easily. This is what Mr. Hamdok and his group try to do. Now, either to remove this power by knowledge of culture, or by removing or pulling out all the people from Sudan, like what sending all of them refugees out of Sudan. Can we add this aspect as the most important aspect in addition to this for?
Yes.
One question.
Could you please introduce yourself?
أنا أولا أحيي أخوي الدكتور سامي، شكرا على هذه الفرصة، شكرا الدكتور حسن مكي على هذه المادة، شكرا لكم مدير الندوة، وشكرا لكم. أنا لدي سؤال واحد. أخونا حسن مكي تعرض وتحدث عن الأسباب التي دفعت إسرائيل لمعاهدة السودان، وماذا تريد إسرائيل عن السودان؟ سؤالي: ماذا تريد إسرائيل عن السودان وقيادة السودان بعد 2019 وضحت مع الكيان الإسرائيلي؟ ماذا تريد الآن؟ أنت تعرضت سابقا لمطالبات السلاسة وموقف السودان في عام 67، بالإضافة للمياه والإسلام والموارد الطبيعية، كل هذا معلوم، لكن ماذا تريد إسرائيل الآن واجهت الحرب في السودان لم يشهدها يعني اصيبت بانها اسوء حروبات الارض.
Let me translate.
Would you like to translate?
All right, this is a quick question. Questioner, the director of Center for the Center of Studies. We thank everybody, the speaker, the moderator, and the center. And he has one question about, he understood, of course, the history behind the Israeli attempt to break up Sudan, but his particular question is, what does Israel want now from Sudan? And we've seen the current civil war, or the current mutiny, or the current attempt by the rapid deployment forces to start a vicious war that Sudan has never seen. So what does Israel want now from Sudan?
After hearing the discussion and the conversation, I will give the final word to our esteemed guest, and we will close the session. I want to add a little one question for myself. That's okay. The fact that Israel has its eyes set on Sudan. My question is, how come when such an obvious enemy is planning for a large country like Sudan, how come the Sudanese people and Sudan is not able to create a counter strategy to safeguard its interests?
Anyhow, I think we have to think about also that is not only by material power we achieve things. There is a room for the spiritual power. And I think also, you know, now
there is a coup d'etat in the world mentality after what happened in Gaza. And that Gaza factor is changing the world culture. Before, I think Sam know more about that than me. Before 20 years, no one can insult Israel in Europe. But now, things change. And this is what Sudanese are talking about. All the world is talking about the right of the Palestinian refugees, the right of peace. Now the agenda of the world. So I think this will give us a room in Sudan. And the other thing is that in Sudan there is also people who are saying, why do we are supporting the why don't we have reconciliation with Israel? Why don't we see the Abrahamic Accord? Why don't we sign it? But Al-Burhan have done it in 2019, but after 5 years, the result is more infiltration of Israel, destruction, suppression of 11 million people from their houses.
So he did sign. So it's been signed by
As
by the Sudanese
it is
government.
secretly, because but Netanyahu, in his book, he says that he agreed Al-Burhan when he met Museveni, and he thinks that Al-Burhan will do it. But I think Al-Burhan is thinking of it as a game. And he's just trying to moderate his situation. So, but for me, the important thing is your strength on the land, your spiritual power, your faith. This is, I think, the Vietnamese, without faith, they have made it. Why cannot we do it? Is our depth and our spirituality and our belief. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the questions. We have now run out of time. I want to thank all the participants and our live audience who has been live on our live stream. We have another seminar coming up in a month. I hope that you will join us there as well. For those who we couldn't include in the discussion and continue the discussion, I apologize. Inshallah, you can carry your discussion on in the future. Thank you so much. We have an award that we want to give.
Thank you.